All right, so this video is going to cover a lot of information related to Tableau that stems from what we can call the metadata model, the different layers of Tableau. And as we go through the different layers, we'll be talking about various aspects of Tableau that we'll be using throughout the semester in certain cases. We may not use all of them all the time. Some of the things I'm going to go over we may not actually use at all, but are things that you should be aware of, and your understanding of these things will hopefully help you to have the proper context when you're working on your analytics, knowing what Tableau is doing and how it's doing it. So first, let's talk about just what is the metadata model in Tableau. In other words, what are all the pieces and how do they fit together? And there's really three layers of abstraction that we need to understand: the connection layer, the data model layer, and the VizQL model layer. Each of these layers are independent from each other. You can see that in the right-hand illustration. Let's go through what each of them does, and then we'll talk about each of them in turn in more detail. So the connection layer contains the information on how you actually access the data, and therefore what is made available to Tableau during analysis. It is not, however, a copy of the data or an import of the data. It's simply information on where the data is and how you connect to it. The data model, again, independent from the connection and the VizQL model, determines once you've made the connection to the data, that's when Tableau makes its determination on whether the data are either dimensions or measures. Again, as you know, you can modify that and change that, but that's where Tableau makes its initial determination. The data model also contains any user-generated fields that you've done as part of your analysis, such as calculations if you've created sets or groups or things of that nature. In the data model can dynamically access your connection, in other words, using live data, or it can be based on an extract of data from the connection. And we'll talk a little bit more about those too in more detail when we talk about the connection in more detail. And then finally, we have the VizQL layer, again, which is independent from the data model and the connection. And you could think of this as Tableau's programming language, what you're learning to do. If this data analytics course was built around R or Python, you'd be learning that particular language. This course is built around Tableau, and you'll be learning Tableau. And that programming language is really the VizQL model. And that's what's on the various shelves in the different visualization views that you create. Before we get on to talking about those three layers in more detail, I just want to go over some terminology that Tableau uses and I'll use, and that might be a little confusing, especially because they sound so closely related. So data source is the term that Tableau uses for all of the metadata related to, just to go back real quickly, the three layers that we just talked about. So in combination, those three layers, the connection, the data model, and the VizQL, are referred to as the data source. The data connection is where the data is located, the file name, the path, the network location. If you're connecting, for example, to a server, what's the server name and what's the sign-in information? That's the data connection, or that's what the term data connection is used for. And then there's source data, which are the database tables that we are extracting data from for our visual analytics, and or the Excel spreadsheets, and or the other different source data types that Tableau is able to connect to. So that's important to make sure you understand the distinctions among those three terms: data source, data connection, and source data.